This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, good morning. My name is Nina Ramal Ganyan. I am a new therapist out of the Baltimore office. What you are about to see is the first of a series of roundtable talks put on by the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Committee here at ABH. DEI's mission is to promote greater diversity, inclusion, and equity as an organization, assist leadership in the implementation of strategic initiatives, and encourage participation in activities to increase awareness of social injustices in the communities we serve. So as an organization committed to equality and social justice, we hope that these talks serve as kind of a starting point for conversations about practice, accountability, self-reflection, inclusion, and ultimately bring us as a ABH community together and improve the services that we're implementing in the community. So the roundtable talks will serve as a series on race in America. Today, we'll be focusing specifically on being Black or African American in the United States and perceptions of being Black and African American. So the way it's going to work is I will pose a question to the group, and then anybody can respond, and we'll move on from there. So is everybody ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Today's question is, when did you first know you were Black?
Hello, everyone. This is Jamal Davis from the Frederick office. When did I first know I was Black? Well, I grew up in a rather homogeneous part of Baltimore City, East Baltimore. So there were no other races other than African Americans in my neighborhood. Of course, when I would travel outside of the neighborhood, I would come across various races. But within my own neighborhood, the extent of diversity um, really took place when police officers would periodically come through the neighborhood, and those police officers were mainly Caucasian male police officers. I wouldn't say that we were treated unfairly, but there was, and even at a young age, I noticed an uncomfortableness amongst my peers when those police officers would show up. Um, we were very during this was several years ago, so we were very mindful to be respectful, to be compliant, if you will, and there was an underlying tone of fear when the police showed up. Um, but it really brought some awareness to me and the dynamic between those in my community and the police at a very early age. I would hear the older people in the community say, "You never speak to police officers." And I guess this trend of seeing law enforcement in a negative light has been, long in the works, and I think in a lot of cases rightfully so. But one main thing that sticks out for me is that I was a young athlete, and I think I was about 8 years old, and I played for a football team that was all African Americans, and we would play several other teams within the community who were also probably 100% African American. And this one time we went and traveled to one of the surrounding suburbs to play a team, and we get there, and I had left something in the car, and my parents give me the key, and I go back to get it out of the car, and a player and his family from the other team parked on the driver's side. So I was in the passenger side getting something out, and I heard the player, who was a Caucasian kid, say, "Dad, are we playing the Black team today?" And his dad responded, "Yeah, so make sure you lock all the car doors." And that was the first time I really felt some discourse in my soul as it related to racial the racial divide, if you will, and that has kind of stuck with me for years. So I think that was the first time that I really focused on my blackness, if you will.
I can also add, thank you, Jamal, for that. Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Young. I am from the Greenbelt office, and my experience is a little bit different. There was an awareness But I can also identify with Jamal with where my community and my environment was homogeneous. So everywhere there was, Black people. But also I grew up in an area where middle class, upper middle class, or it would be considered one of the more affluent areas for African Americans in the state of Maryland in Prince George's County. And so my experience really didn't happen until I can remember one specifically. In sixth grade, all of my schools were majority Black people. I did have one friend who was white, but I never looked at it as race until one day she invited me over for a sleepover. And it was completely different. It was like I was shifting from one world to the next. And the language was different. The music was different. The conversation was different. And I really didn't know, how to fit in. My hair was different. My skin color was different. I couldn't relate to anything really that they were talking about. And what I also realized was that I, at the time, didn't know, but there was code switching. And with code switching, I'm not sure if many of you know about it, but it's changing your tone, changing the way that you talk, changing your vernacular to accommodate and to fit the environment that you're in. And I didn't know that that's what I was doing at the time, but it was really because I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to fit in, but the reality is the only thing that changed was my tone and the way that I addressed people. But I felt, kind of outside. And I almost felt like they're like, well, what do we do with you? um, and I went home and never really addressed it because I was back in my environment. And it wasn't until I was in college where I realized again, if I am surrounded by people who look like me, who sound like me, who talk like me, but all along it was ingrained to make sure that when you speak to people, you use a certain tone because you want them to be comfortable around you. You want to be accepted. Also, you're more likely to get ahead based on how you sound versus where you came from. And when they see me, I might not be a representation of where I came from because I don't sound like what would be stereotypically Black. So that was really my experience with first kind of having a taste of knowing that I was Black, but it wasn't until I was a little bit older because I was in the comfort of persons who looked like me from the same socioeconomic status. And it wasn't until I kind of went into the world. And of course, my experience is different as a Black woman than a Black man. But it wasn't until I went into the world that I kind of knew, okay, this is different. And because I didn't sound the way that stereotypically people would think that I should sound because of the way I look, I had to kind of navigate through that. So that's my experience.
Okay, so my name is Benita and I'm from the Gaithersburg office. So just like Danielle and Jamal's experiences, I've had a different type of experience, whereas I never grew up in a homogeneous environment. My background is military, so I grew up in a very diverse environment. It wasn't actually until I came and my parents actually retired from the military that I started to notice the differences and the segregation that kind of existed, even though I lived in a very diverse area. It was very much embedded in all of us that, we did have to speak a certain way, as Danielle mentioned about code switching. Our tone of voice had to be a certain, level whenever we would come into contact with people who were not in our racial background. We also had a lot of expectation to live up to the non-stereotypical roles that are perceived by us or by others. My father was very much of a, you have certain expectations you need to, as far as education is concerned, as far as our end goal is concerned, as far as like our social peer group, as far as work ethic is concerned. My dad basically, and he put us in Saturday school, he put us in summer school, and he would always say to us, don't go into the world acting like your color. I never understood it when I was growing up. I clearly understand that now. And it actually did help me a lot when I transitioned into like my early adulthood, because my biggest experience outside of some of the experiences that I did face when I was younger even within my own ethnic group, you know, because I did get some racial connotations from my own color as far as I spoke, as far as the complexion of my skin. I got it from the other side of my race as well. But my biggest aha moment about my Blackness was when I was in my 20s and I was at my friend's apartment building complex, and we weren't able to leave because there were a lot of police activity. What we witnessed was a man who was African American getting detained. He had about 3 children with him, 1 teenager, 2 young children, and then his wife or girlfriend was also present. She was obviously a little bit frantic. They continued to talk to her to try to calm her down. They told her to, you know, kind of back away. The children were there, they were crying. The mother who was there, she did comply with everything, but honestly, like out of nowhere, one of the police officers punched her in the face, and then they detained her as well. All the witnesses around were very shocked, but we also knew not to get overly involved and too close to the police officers. And another officer, once his mother got punched, the teenager was very distraught, and he got verbally aggressive, but not in a manner where he was trying to, you know, say anything negative to harm the police officer. Nothing in his vocabulary indicated that he was threatening them. But an officer approached him and basically told him that he was going to detain him as well. And myself and my friend, we went over there, talked to the teenager, kind of got him away from that situation, and the little kids. Again, very much in shock by how it all occurred. When we were able to leave, within like a matter of less than a minute, I got pulled over by one of the officers that was there. As soon as I was pulled over, he basically said to me in a nutshell, "Get the F out of the car." Didn't ask me for my license, didn't ask me for my registration, nothing. Did not follow proper protocol. I did ask why he was pulling me over. I told him I was not going to get out of the vehicle. My friend, who was of a darker complexion than me, started to become irate, was very upset, verbally louder. So my teachings from my childhood did help me in that situation because I maintained a calm demeanor. I asked the officer more than once, who was very hostile, about why he was pulling me over, and I told him that I would like a female officer to come to the car. Eventually, I did get out of the car, and I asked him again why he pulled me over, and he said, "You're just mad because we just arrested your father." And I said, "Oh, the gentleman that you arrested at the apartment complex?" And he said, "Yes, that's your father." And I said, "Oh, because he's Black, he's my father." And so the police officer then proceeded to tell me, "Oh, don't pull the NIGGER SHIT on me." And that's when I pretty much knew, okay, so being Black is going to constantly be an issue, even though I'm proud of my Black. That's my biggest moment.
Damn, Benita, thank you for sharing that. That was impactful for all of us. I'm sorry that happened to you. I think one of the things that I kind of noticed within all 3 of your stories was this idea of kind of like rules, and rules that like dominant culture makes, and then rules that we learn within our own communities about how to function. And so I guess like thinking with that topic and kind of opening it up to the rest of the group, like, does anyone else have experience with this idea of like rules and racial rules and sort of how to engage with the world generally based on who we are and our race and who other people are?
So I'm Kate Schlatter. I'm from the Gaithersburg office. Obviously being a white woman, I have not had these experiences, just to say that. I've never had to feel afraid of cops when I get pulled over. It's never been, I've never had those thoughts running through my mind. I've never had to code switch. I've never had to, I've never heard someone speaking so derogatorily of like my race, point blank, that Jamal was saying. I grew up in a really a pretty diverse household with different races, and I grew up in schools that were very diverse. So I kind of thought that I I didn't really think a lot about racism when I was younger. No one really talked about it. And I thought because I was in an environment where I was, we were in just such a diverse environment that I was kind of like exempt from being racist. Like, I'm not racist. Like, I have a Black sister. Like, all my friends are like different colors. Like, I'm not racist, So you guys are saying like when you first realized when you were Black, obviously it's different because I'm white, but I kind of realized that race is an issue, for as someone coming from a privileged perspective, around like the age of 11, which is probably older for most people of color. Probably realize it a lot younger, I'm guessing. And I was talking to my friend and I was asking her about her hair. She was mixed, biracial. I believe she was white and Black. And I was asking her tips about her hair because she had really nice hair and I didn't like my hair. My hair was greasy and, I had to wash it all the time and I just didn't like it. And I liked her hair, I didn't understand that there was like historical trauma, obviously, behind that conversation. And she didn't talk to me for like 2 weeks. I didn't know what I did. It became this big thing and I felt horrible. And I feel like that is kind of just one of many examples of how I learned about race growing up, because I only got to learn about it when I was making mistakes and when I was hurting other people's feelings and somebody brought it to my attention, which sucks that I had to put them in that position in order to learn about it, right? Which is why conversations like this are so important to have with our children, and just at work in general. And, I know that I probably continue to make mistakes, but I'm, working really hard to learn and kind of put myself out there. And hopefully, hopefully people will correct me along the way and help me. But it's just, it's important for us to kind of realize that, this isn't something that we can expect you guys to do alone, right? And we have to kind of get out and get involved in the conversation.
Hi, I'm Nikki Lack from the Gaithersburg office. Like Kate, I am perceived as white. I come from a diverse background of Middle East and European, but I have white privilege. Nobody, you look at me and I'm white. I think that growing up, because it didn't affect me, I wasn't really aware of it. I remember watching Roots. That is my, experience as a child. That was my only experience until I came here to high school. And I had friends from all diverse backgrounds. And for me, I took people as they were. There wasn't a race issue in my mind because I was completely ignorant about racism. Since I guess doing my MSW and being more informed, I feel angry at myself for not being aware, for even maybe not caring because it didn't affect me directly, I'm thinking. And at this point, I feel a lot of rage when I hear and see racism happening. And all I can think is, this is the way Black people have been feeling for centuries. So, for instance, at this time, I feel like I'm always walking on eggshells because I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to offend anyone or hurt anyone. Again, that is how Black people, I imagine, have felt all this time, walking on eggshells. I recently learned that in my attempts to understand, I say the wrong things. So I feel that right now, listening instead of talking is what is needed for me on my side, to learn, to listen. And I want to be I want to be the change I want to see in the world. I want to make a difference, because even though I am not Black, it may not be directly affecting me. It affects the people I love. It affects the world, our society, our community, and just equal humane justice. So this is very important, I think, this roundtable talk. And I really appreciate people being vulnerable and, talking about their experiences, negative and positive ones.
This is Jamal again from Frederick. I think what's really important, and what it often boils down to is the lack of exposure. And I'm talking about fairly deep exposure. My parents, although I grew up in a completely um, African American environment, my mother and father, I may have been, I don't know, I guess fortunate to have both parents in the home. And they made a focused effort to expose me to other races, cultures, you name it. So I would go to summer camps in Jewish communities with all Jewish kids. I went to an Asian camp one summer. My dad would say, "You're playing baseball out in this suburb." And I didn't understand it. I'm like, "We got teams here. Why are you going to drive me 40 minutes away, 50 minutes away to be the only African American kid playing in this baseball league?" And now I feel that did me, it was a huge benefit, because it gave me an opportunity to be exposed to various races, cultures, modes of thinking, you name it. Um, my my parents sent me to private school my whole life. So from second grade through high school. So I went to majority white private schools. I would go from my neighborhood, catch two buses to school. And those two worlds never commingled. Like my white friends from school never came to my neighborhood. And my friends from the neighborhood, I mean, they may come see me play because I was involved in sports. The kids from my neighborhoods would say, "Why, how do you deal with those white people?" Because they had no exposure. The white folks would have all of these preconceived ideas about, do you have to carry a gun at night? They watch the news. White folks watch the news and rap videos, and they think that that's Black people across the board, right? So they would have all of these preconceived ideas about what it's like to grow up in my community. And it was also a lot of pressure to kind of dismantle. As I got older, I welcomed the opportunity, but to kind of dismantle some of those myths, So, I didn't carry guns, I didn't sell drugs. All of my friends, weren't involved in gangs. A lot of folks were very educated and had great jobs and hardworking people. So I kind of welcomed that opportunity to kind of enlighten both parties, but the perceptions were just ridiculous. I mean, it is literally, some people, if you don't have exposure, you rely heavily on the media and word of mouth, which often is so far from the truth. If you watch the news tonight, you'll see, several Black people shot inevitably. And if you have no direct relationship with African Americans, you may assume that that's what we do. That's what everyone does. So I urge everyone to take a focused effort to engage people that are not like yourself. And I'm not just talking about one day at a community center somewhere. You really have to, if you truly want to make a difference and be more enlightened, you got to immerse yourself in it. And unfortunately, fortunately, I had the opportunity to do it as a young child. A lot of us now, if you choose to and you think it's important, will have to start that journey as an adult. But it will make you a well-rounded individual. It'll definitely help you as a therapist. So I encourage everybody to do it, and you'll quickly learn that what you have conjured up in your mind is often not the truth at all.
Thank you, Jamal. Hi, everybody. I'm Tamara Castillo. I am a mentor from the Gaithersburg location. I'm very happy to be a part of this table talk. I am very sad to say that I lived in ignorance growing up. My community was a mix of Hispanics and Blacks, and we all played together, football, basketball, hide and seek. We were all riding in the streets. To me, I didn't think anything of it. Growing up in my household, my mother would make a lot of nasty comments to our Black neighbors. And to me, I was younger. I didn't think anything of it. I thought, oh well, my mother, she's older, she's watching out in the neighborhood. She must know more a little bit than I do, be more observant. But that still didn't stop me from playing with my Black neighbors or my Hispanic neighbors. And it wasn't until, for me, high school where I really noticed that race mattered. I was on sports teams, and in sports teams, everybody joins in. And everybody from my grade, we all knew each other and we all spoke to one another, whites, blacks, Hispanics. But it wasn't until I sat at lunch where I was sitting with my group of friends, my main group of friends, and you would look out at, the cafeteria, and I noticed that on one side, it was the Caucasian kids, and then on all the way on the right side were the Black kids. And it was like, to me at the time, I didn't pay attention. I didn't think anything of it because I was also, a minority in the race, and that a race that many people talked about. And so I am sad to say that my ignorance played a huge role into the lack of knowledge that I have up until my 20s, where now I am fully aware that race has been an issue for years. And I just want to be a part of the talk and be able to talk to my mentees, my clients about, how they feel about race. And because to me, I wasn't spoken to at 11, 12, 13 years old about that. And I want them to be able to have a safe space in order for them to talk about not only their issues that they're going through when it comes to their friends, or my mom's not listening to me or anything like that, but some deeper issues than that they don't feel like they can talk to outside of their self.
I'm going to piggyback kind of off what Jamal and Tamara said about kind of immersing yourself in the diversity and kind of noticing a little bit of what we perceive versus what we're actually in. For Tamara, what she said about noticing the segregation within the lunchroom, that was a big deal in high school. Like for me, again, growing up, diversity was promoted, but I did struggle once we got out of military life with identity issues because it was like, you're not Black enough, you're not Hispanic enough. So I had this huge issue growing up. However, eventually I was really tired of it, and I met other people who were either biracial or who just didn't really care. And when we were in the cafeteria, we did notice the segregation, and our table was the most diverse. We had every race represented at our table. And as a mother, I will say that I had a brief when I was pregnant. My ex he's Hispanic and he's very light skinned. Because of everything that's been going on, because I know how huge a race is an issue, and because of what my brothers were taught as well, I did kind of want my son to be lighter, but I'm so proud that he's my complexion. But, it does come with a sense of fear, but it also comes with a sense of strength, and I'm able to pass that along, and not only like about his Blackness, like Hispanic background, but also about the diversity that he is around all the time.
Well, I think that Benita, Jamal, Tamara, you all bring up really good points. And I think from Jamal, one interesting thing is the juxtaposition to, as a Black person or a person of color, needing to have knowledge of other races and making sure that you educate yourself and that you are well-rounded at a very young age about who to talk to, when to talk to them, what neighborhood or what area you should or should not be in. And I think that that's important for, all of our viewers to understand that this does go on, and for Tamara and for Kate, for just being vulnerable enough and open enough to say that there were certain places that I was ignorant, as in not having knowledge about, but I'm willing, open, and ready to educate myself on that and then become an advocate, as well as Nikki. And then with Benita, she said something that just triggered a thought, with the idea of wanting your child to have a specific skin tone. So I'm going to go way back. My grandmother comes from a place in Virginia, again, a pretty affluent for that time area for Black people. And it's like above the Mason-Dixon line, and she's a fair-skinned Southern woman. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the paper bag test. But even with the paper bag test, and she's fair skinned, all of her sisters are fair skinned, long, beautiful hair. And I don't know if I would pass the paper bag test in that day, because my skin tone is just a little bit darker than the paper bag test. So that's where sometimes we hear this phrase, you have to work twice as hard just to be seen or known as half as good, or to be respected half as much. And I remember my grandmother, even with my sister and I, when we dated, it's almost like, okay, whether we know it consciously or subconsciously, it's like, is he too dark? Or, what color foundation should I wear, or not stay in the sun too long? I mean, I know that my challenges with race have been a little bit different than all those that are on here, but even with the more affluent side, it could be a socioeconomic thing, or it could be a status thing. And I definitely experienced that. And another thing that I experienced too, again, even using my tone now as we do this round table, making sure that when I was on the phone for business, I sounded a certain way so that I could be respected. And I remember one time showing up to a person's door for business, and they refused to open the door and told me I wasn't who I was. You are not Miss Young. You are not Miss Young. You sounded like a white woman on the phone, or an Asian woman on the phone. You are not Miss Young. To the point where I had to take my ID and literally pin it to the glass so that she could see who I was. And so all this conversation now is just triggering that memory. But I do appreciate everyone on here today who's saying, I want to be an advocate, especially, I think Tamara said, for her mentees. I think that is excellent. I think this conversation is very necessary.
I agree. And from a therapeutic standpoint, there's so many clients that are out there that, because of our level of comfort, they are very much open and very much, attuned with us when they know that they can come to us about these racial issues. Because like I said, I've had plenty of clients who have suffered and have had their aha moments as a Black person. And, we're talking about young as 6 that have already had these ideas of, oh my God, am I going to get shot when I go outside, or can I even play outside? And it's like, these are the things that, as professionals, we do have to be willing and be very open to wanting to talk to our clients about.
Yes, actually, Bonita, I found that with clients, for example, a 8-year-old Black male boy who says to me, I'm scared that my family is going to get killed or shot, I feel I can't say to him, don't worry, that's not going to happen. It's how, as a clinician, do I comfort and provide support when I know the reality? So I think it's important as clinicians that we find strategies, especially as a non-Black clinician working with Black clients, to learn strategies on how to provide that support and comfort, apart from just listening, how to be able to do that, because I want to help more, especially this 8-year-old boy who shouldn't even have to be thinking these thoughts. So these round table talks are very, very useful, because it helps us as clinicians learn from each other how to help our clients better.
And I think like I think one thing I've heard kind of from what everybody's saying is that like race is really complicated and it's nuanced, and Black people are not a monolith and Hispanic people are not a monolith, and some of us might be Hispanic and Black, and some of us might be something else and something else. And part of what we're talking about here is exposure and listening to other people's experiences and having conversations. And I think this feels like a really good starting point, but I love that what we're talking about here as therapists is that like these are conversations that a lot of our clients are thinking about and wanting to have. And yeah, thinking about who we are as clinicians, what our race is, and how we're perceived by the rest of the world, and what our experience has been, and also how our clients perceive us and how they're perceived, I think is a really important part of creating a therapeutic space that's safe. And so I think, yeah, continue to have these conversations. I think that's a really important part of what we're trying to do here, is not just talk about race generally, but also race in the context of therapy and race in the context of being a behavioral health organization. And so actually that was a really nice way to sort of wrap up the conversation. We're about at time. Does anybody have any kind of like last thoughts or last words that they'd like to leave anybody with before I close out?
I just want to thank everybody that was comfortable enough to get uncomfortable and talk about, our experiences and our ignorances and what we want to change in order for us to, make that difference, but not only amongst ourselves and, our company, but also those that we are trying to help get through day by day, their emotions, their struggles, their anything. And I just really appreciate those that are willing to be uncomfortable, because at the end of this, I think we're getting that much more closer to being comfortable, being able to look at one another and ask those hard questions. And maybe one day those hard questions won't be so hard; they'll just be questions.
Yep.
Yeah.
And lastly, I would just like that. I think it was Nikki that said, it's important for her to listen. We talk about uncomfortable conversations, and that's bi-directional. I think right now, it's very important to just provide a safe platform and just listen.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to give insight. You don't have to express understanding. Just provide the safe environment for the client and listen.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you become more educated and aware, then the conversations will grow from there.
Mm-hmm.
And to lastly add to Jamal, I think also our clients would appreciate the transparency of, I'm going through this along with you, and I might not have the words to say, but I can certainly either empathize with you and say, I can only imagine what it is. Allow me to help you through the emotions. And, as I go through it as well. And I think clients would definitely appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to piggyback, sorry, I also think it's fine for us to say, hey, I can't understand exactly what you're going through, but I care, and I'm here, and process those emotions with me. Like that is my role,
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, everybody. Thanks everybody for participating, for being vulnerable, and thank you to everybody who watched this. As members of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee, we're really excited about this series of roundtable talks. If you were moved by anything you heard today, or it really brought up a story for you that you want to share, or please look, we're going to be sending a follow-up email to this video and collecting stories from people as well. And also look forward to our next roundtable talk, which is going to be about being Asian American in the United States. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you at our next roundtable talk.
Thank you,
Bye.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.